Good morning and welcome to the Dam Safety Workshop. My name is Trina Lancaster. I am one of the team leaders in our program and I'll be starting off our workshop today. We'll start with a program overview, talk about EAPs, legislation, and then some potential funding sources. So let's start with a little background on our program first. We have 26 full-time staff that consist of 15 PEs and 3 engineers in training. The majority of our staff do have engineering degrees, and we encourage them all to get their licenses, so we do have several people working on studying for their exams. And then here's a list of the things we typically do. We inspect dams, generally every 5 years, review hydraulic and hydrologic studies, review breach studies, plans and specifications, and EAPs. But then there's some other things that we do on the side that you might not be aware of. We try to attend tabletop exercises. Sometimes we attend potential failure mode analyses, review dam-related bills that come up during legislation. We run the HHPD grant program, review district creation applications, and sometimes we get involved with water rights as well. So, effects from this pandemic. We are still working from home. We're going to transition back to the office sometime this year, hopefully. But if you need to contact one of us, it's best to email us first, and then we can give you a good contact phone number, or we could set up a Teams meeting to work with you and your consultants. We have traveled less, so that means less inspections. Depending on when COVID was spiking, we might have just done some local Central Texas inspections, but now we are trying to get back out there. So just because we haven't come out in the last year doesn't mean we're not out there still thinking about you guys. But you should still be doing your own inspections, keep working on those EAPs, conduct your tabletops. Everything that you would normally be doing should still be going on. So let's talk some about hazard classification. If you've been to any of our workshops in the past or read any of our inspection reports, you should be familiar with this. The hazard classification is based on the potential loss of human life or properties downstream and not based on the physical condition of the dam. Breach analyses are used to determine those downstream hazards and get estimated inundation areas, so we know which structures, roads, and whatnot might be at risk. And if we have a breach analysis on file, then we'll use those to determine hazard classification. Otherwise, our staff are going to look at elevation contours, aerial maps, and try to make the best determination we can from just information we have available. So high hazard dams are those that have an expected loss of life. These structures would have 3 or more residential structures downstream, maybe an arterial roadway or major railroads and other commercial and public facilities. The significant hazard dams would have 1 or 2 homes downstream. They could have collector roads, minor railroads, and also some of those public utilities. And then low hazard dams have no loss of life expected, so no homes downstream, maybe some local roads or limited farm buildings, that type of stuff. So in Texas, right now, we have 7,315 state regulated dams. Approximately 4,000 of those are non-exempt, and then there's approximately 3,200 exempt dams. Of those that are non-exempt, there's 1,500 high hazard, around 300 significant hazard, and 2,000 plus that are low hazard. So more than half of those non-exempt dams are low hazard, and then the other 1,800 are ones that we would be inspecting and regulating. The dam safety regulations are under the Texas Water Code, Chapter 12.052, and the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 299. So let's move on to emergency action plans. EIPs are required for our non-exempt high and significant hazard dams, but we also recommend them for any exempt significant dams. Currently, we have about 660 non-exempt dams that have EAPs on file that have been approved by TCEQ. There's another 760 or so with draft EAPs on file, and then there's still 400 that haven't been submitted to us. So if you're in one of those categories with a draft or an unsubmitted EAP, give us a call and let us help you get those plans in place. Our EIP guidelines were updated in December of 2019, and they are available online. We have a PDF version of the guidelines and then some fillable templates in Microsoft Word. So you can go to that website that's on the screen and find these guidelines. When you go to that page, you'll want to scroll down until you find this part of the website. The link up there for the Texas Administrative Code will take you to the rules specifically about EAPs, and then the link for guidelines for developing EAPs will take you to this spot where you can download the PDF and the fillable templates. So why do you need an EAP? Because dams fail. We've had owners tell us that their dam has been around for 50, maybe 100 years and they haven't had any issues, so it's not going to fail now. But unfortunately, sometimes they do. So you want to be prepared if and when something happens. Go ahead and plan and practice for an emergency ahead of time and not be stuck in the middle of an emergency without any kind of plan. So this picture here is of the Edenville Dam in Michigan. This was in May of 2020 after about 48 hours of heavy rain. You can see that section of the dam that failed. So the release of water from that failure also caused a downstream dam to overtop and fail. 11,000 people were evacuated, 2,500 structures were damaged, and luckily they did have a plan and no major injuries or fatalities occurred. So another reason to have an EAP is to identify which conditions at your dam could be considered an emergency. That information in that box on the left is from one of our templates, and it describes potential issues for a watch condition in this case. You're going to want to do something like this for your own dam, identify what conditions could occur and which emergency condition they would warrant. So is it a watch condition, an imminent or possible dam failure condition? Make sure you know ahead of time what conditions you're going to want to activate that EAP for. So we have some examples in the guidelines and you can use those, but you also want to consider specific issues at your dam. Are there ongoing problems that might need to be added to your list? Or maybe there's structures really close downstream of your dam and you want to activate your conditions sooner. You don't have to use exactly what's in the guidelines, but make sure you have something. So another reason that you would want an emergency action plan is to expedite an effective response. So the goal of your emergency action plan is to have a clear, detailed instruction on and take out all the guesswork when that emergency happens. When these situations come up, we often get stressed and worried, and you don't want to have to second guess what you're doing. So if you have a plan in place, you can just follow those instructions and not worry about what the next step is. This photo is a dam in England in 2019, and the spillway began to fail. Once they did notice that this deterioration was occurring, they were able to start drawing down the reservoir, and the local police evacuated 1,500 downstream residents. They closed roads to reduce the risk, and then they were able to start putting in some bags of aggregate in the damaged area to reinforce the structure and keep the reservoir safe until they could get it drained and repairs could be made. So this is a good example of why our templates include a page for supplies and equipment and maybe local contractors who have those supplies. So in an emergency, when you need to have things done at your dam, you know exactly who to call and you're not searching Google as your dam's failing, trying to find a contractor. So finally, a good plan is important to prevent and reduce the loss of life and property. You don't want your plan to just sit on the bookshelf. You want to train your staff, conduct tabletops, include the different groups and individuals that are going to be responsible for notifying those downstream residents and also those who are going to be trying to save your dam. Make sure that your plan is up to date. All of these will help you in an emergency so that you can save lives and property. This is a picture of the Oroville Dam in California. In 2017, flows in their spillway was causing damage. They ended up lowering the flows in their principal spillway and let the water rise, and flows began over the emergency spillway. Then the hillside downstream of the emergency spillway began to rapidly erode, and they had to make a decision. So they had already trained with, their emergency response people. They had their engineers on site, and they had to make this tough decision, and they decided to go ahead and release flows in that service spillway, and you can see how damaged it ended up. But they also evacuated almost 200,000 people, and they were able to assess that situation quickly, and those people were only displaced for a day before they were confident that everything was going to be all right. And of course, you can see they did have some major repairs to make after the event, but repairing a spillway and a dam is better than having lives lost. So if you were the dam owner for any of those examples, you would want to know that your notification flow charts are up to date, that everything is in one place, and you can easily get the contact information for everyone who needs to be notified when emergency is happening. So that's why we require these annual EAP updates. Most of the updates that we receive are just updated flowcharts. If you do need to make changes on a flowchart, you don't have to wait for your annual update. You can submit those at any time because you want to make sure they're the most up-to-date as possible. And remember that our template is a starting place. You'll want to work with your local EMC and determine downstream hazards and who needs to be contacted and how they need to be contacted. So if you need to add more people or organizations to these flowcharts, that is fine. For a larger dam, you might want to consider having a contact specifically for media relations. That way you can ensure that the correct and most up-to-date information is going out to the media. You could add in those social media channels as well. We know most people get their information that way anyways, so be the first to put it out there and make sure that it gets put out correctly. And then make sure that everyone on that flowchart knows their role. So TCQ should be notified, but we shouldn't be responsible for notifying anybody else. If your event were to happen after hours, you're going to get a call center, and we're not going to be able to help you, and we won't be able to get out in the field immediately to help you either. And then whoever's on your list that's responsible for notifying others, whether that means other contacts on this list or your downstream residents, make sure that they understand that responsibility and have the information that they need. You can't just list somebody on the plan and leave it at that. They need to be trained. They need to know what messages they're supposed to portray and know that they have a responsibility as part of your plan. So sometimes that means working with your local sheriff or police, your EMC, those that are going to be contacting the downstream residents to make sure they know how to do that. Some owners and EMCs are going to use reverse 911. Some are going to have lists of all the downstream residents and businesses with phone numbers. Some might just use their inundation maps. But whatever method you're using, everybody needs to understand what that method is and make sure that they have all the information they need. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these annual updates. The Texas Administrative Code does require that you review them at least annually and update them as often as necessary. So if there are no changes needed, you can just send a notice to us that you've reviewed the EAP and no updates are needed. Just be aware that in our template, we do have this log sheet of changes, an annual EAP review checklist, the plan review and update, and training records. So if you've done those things, you should be able to send at least those pages that have been updated to us. And then ensure that your approval and implementation page is current. So if your EMC has changed or your dam owner representative has changed and you need to get new signatures, go ahead and get those signatures and send them in. While you're doing those annual updates, be sure to check your inundation maps. Many of the maps on file at TCQ are from 10 years ago, and some areas downstream of these dams have gotten lots of new development. And we want to make sure the maps are reflecting any new development that's happened. And then again, make sure those maps contain the details needed from your EMCs or your people responsible for evacuating residents. We have seen maps that are just old topo maps. There's some that are Google Street Maps, and some are detailed aerial maps. So just make sure that what you have is going to be sufficient in the middle of an emergency. And then also consider calling out any structures or neighborhoods, roads, businesses, all those things that could be affected. And then also know that some EMCs may request maps for different scenarios than what TCEQ dam safety requires. Generally, the ones we require are a PMF breach and maybe a sunny day breach, but your EMC might want to have other flood events represented as well in those EAPs. So work with them. You can always submit more to TCEQ. We just need at least a map. So I've talked a lot about emergency management coordinators, or EMCs. You want to go ahead and build that relationship with them now before an emergency. Make sure that everybody knows the plan, you ask questions of each other ahead of time, and you understand each other's terminology. What the dam owner might consider a watch condition might mean something different to the EMC, so you want to make sure you're on the same page with everything. And then your emergency management coordinator should review and acknowledge their responsibilities for your EAP and participate in your tabletop. So we do ask that the EMCs sign your approval and implementation pages in the EAP, and we will wait to give you acceptance of that EAP until we have those signatures. This could be multiple EMCs that need to be involved. Maybe you have a site-specific EMC, there could be city EMCs or county EMCs that all need to be notified in an emergency. So any of them that have responsibilities for notifying downstream residents should be signing your EAP as well. In this day and age of everything being virtual and not meeting together and signing a piece of paper all at once, you could send them their own page to sign and they could return that, or we'll even accept an email from the EMC that acknowledges that they have received the EAP and they agree to the notification process. So the Texas Administrative Code for dam safety does require that you conduct a tabletop exercise at least once every 5 years. This is a meeting of everyone involved with a response during an emergency and should include at least all of those that are going to be making notifications for your flow chart. Definitely include your EMCs. They should be attending and become familiar with your dam so they can be more effective when an emergency were to happen. And they have more experience with emergencies, so they might have some ideas that can help make your plan better. These exercises can be done virtually if you need to. We've had some successful virtual tabletops over the last year. And if you let TCEQ know when and where your tabletop is going to happen, we'll try to get staff attending as well. So these exercises could be conducted in different ways. You could have a simulated exercise where you work through an emergency event as if it were actually happening. You follow all the steps laid out in your EAP and see where issues might come up. You could just sit down and work through each of the pages of your EAP and ensure that all the information is correct and everybody understands their responsibilities. Whatever option you choose, you want to encourage discussion among the participants. And as you proceed through your exercise, evaluate the effectiveness of your EAP. So if there's any concerns that come up or questions, make sure you work through those and resolve them while you're all in the room together. And then after the exercise, update sections of the EAP that might need to be updated and provide a summary of the exercise to TCEQ. So just some miscellaneous information about EAPs. They are confidential. TCEQ won't share them with anyone unless the owner specifically gives us permission or asks us to share with somebody. We do keep these in our own filing cabinets versus sending them to central records with our other files, so the public doesn't have access to these either. And because of that, since we do keep them in our own file cabinets, if you send them in with a binder or binding on it, we're going to take them out of that because we don't have room to store hundreds and hundreds of binders in our file cabinets. So you can submit them in a binder if you want, but it's not required. And we also just need one copy for our files. We have gotten information that the National Weather Service can and will issue flash flood warnings based on the info you provide when you call them about a potential breach of your dam. So be careful of what you're saying and make sure that they understand the situation and what that might mean going forward. And then Dee McCauley is our new EAP coordinator. So here's her email address. You can email her if you have questions about your EAP, need assistance in how to put it together, or if you're just ready to submit an EAP or an update. Okay, I'm going to move forward with an update about legislation. I'm going to first kind of touch on two bills that came through the last session that affected dam safety. The first one is House Bill 26, and it amended Water Code 12.052A, which required dams with gated spillways that regulate floodwaters to add some things to their EAP. This part is for providing notice to those downstream of them that spillway releases to regulate floodwaters are going to occur. The notices have to contain information about the river basin affected, the amount and duration of the release, information on potential downstream flooding from the National Weather Service, and then a disclaimer that describes that those impacts are estimates and could vary. This information is required in EAPs for only those dams that have gated spillways to regulate floodwaters. So this only affected like 52 dams, and most have already submitted something. They were all due to us by June 1st of 2020. The second bill from last session is House Bill 137, which amended Water Code 12.052 as well, and it requires TCEQ to provide biannual reports. These reports are prepared by TCEQ and submitted to local emergency management directors and councils of government. So these reports are going out to each city, county, and COG that have dams in their jurisdiction to inform those local jurisdictions of high and significant hazard dams in their area. It also includes the current condition of the dam. We also send out notice to the county, city, and COG within 30 days of a dam's hazard classification changing. If you do receive these reports, just remember that they are confidential, so don't share them with others. And if you receive the report and you don't think you're the right person for it, or if there's another more appropriate contact to give it to, then just let us know and we'll update our records. Okay, so moving on to the current legislative session. There's two bills out there that affect dam safety. The first one is Senate Bill 600, which adds Water Code Section 12.053, which is going to require river authorities to provide some information to TCEQ annually. This information is going to include locations of their dams, who has jurisdiction over the dam to operate it, required maintenance schedule, costs of operation and maintenance, and the method of financing for those operation and maintenance costs. TCEQ is going to post this information on the website. The bill has passed in both the House and Senate. And then House Bill 1606 with a companion bill, Senate Bill 588. This bill only applies to the Upper Brushy Creek WCID dams, and it is just going to state that the district is not required to follow municipal regulations regarding dams. They're just going to have to follow the state rules. So municipalities can't add extra requirements to the district. House Bill 1606 has passed in both the House and Senate, and then the companion bill was left in committee. Potential funding. This is an exciting topic for everybody. First up is the rehabilitation of high hazard potential dams. I'll refer to this as the HHPD grant. This is a FEMA grant opportunity to do what that name says, rehabilitate high hazard dams. It can provide funding for different stages of rehabilitation, including engineering studies, planning, design, and eventually construction. The goal of this grant is to reduce or eliminate risk of dams, and then increase understanding and management of those risks. So as I said, this dam will provide financial assistance for eligible high hazard dams. FEMA hopes to encourage us to use risk-informed decision-making for the dam owners and TCEQ as we work through the funding opportunity, to consider dam risks in our mitigation planning on the local and state level, and to help with community preparedness. In FY 2019, there were 26 states who applied for funding, and Texas was awarded $574,000 out of $10 million nationwide. We were able to fund engineering and studies for 3 dams. In FY20, 29 states applied, and Texas was awarded almost $1 million out of that $10 million nationwide, and we funded engineering studies, design, and construction for 8 dams. For FY21, there's $11.6 million available nationwide. TCEQ is going to submit our initial application. It's due by June 25th, and we have notified the dam owners who are eligible to apply. If you didn't get notification, you are welcome to email me and I will get some more information for you, but we've contacted everybody who is eligible. We expect to get our funding award from FEMA in the fall of this year. So eligible dams for this grant are high hazard. They have an EAP on file with the state. They fail to meet state dam safety standards, so that might mean your dam is hydraulically inadequate or its condition is poor. We cannot fund any dams that are built under the Secretary of Agriculture, so none of the NRCS structures, and we cannot fund licensed hydroelectric dams. FEMA has this eligibility matrix that we're going to use to determine the eligibility this year. On the left, you see the likelihood of failure, and that's going to be based on the National Inventory of Dams condition. That NID condition is based on the condition of the dam during the last inspection and also the hydraulic adequacy of the dam. And then across the bottom, you see the population at risk is the other factor of this. So dams that fall out in that red section are definitely eligible for the grant. That yellow section possibly are eligible for the grant. We would just have to have some extra justification to FEMA, and then anything that falls into that green section is not eligible for this grant. Some of the requirements of this grant are that subrecipients must be non-federal government organizations or nonprofits. If there are any private owners that want to pursue this grant, you're going to have to reach out to your local government or a nonprofit to sponsor you. FEMA does require that the local jurisdiction has an approved hazard mitigation plan that includes all dam risks. A lot of these local jurisdictions, you guys have a mitigation plan and it might include information on dams. However, there's some very specific requirements from FEMA for this grant that have to be updated. They do allow us to update these plans within the first year of the grant period, but you're going to have to get approval for that. And then once you get approved for funding, you're going to have to prepare a floodplain management plan within 2 years of award, and it will have to be implemented within 2 years of the rehabilitation completion. And then finally, this grant does require a 35% local match. So eligible projects for FY21 include planning and design. This could be evacuation plans, floodplain management plans, studies to determine risk, environmental studies, development of operation and maintenance plans, public education, dam risk and consequence studies, preliminary engineering, feasibility studies, mapping, engineering survey, inundation modeling, all those kinds of things. You could fund engineering design and specifications. However, in FY21, we cannot fund any construction costs, and FEMA won't let us use this grant for operation and maintenance costs. So if you just need to mow or take out trees and stuff like that, we can't use this funding for those types of projects. And then you also can't modify a dam to produce hydroelectric power or increase water supply. Basically everything that we would be funding will be reducing risk at the dam or improving the safety of the dam. If you'd like to find more information on this, you can go to the FEMA website listed here. You can also just Google FEMA HHPD and you'll get to this page, or email me questions and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Another funding source that we just found out about is this water infrastructure financing program. They offer long-term, low-cost credit assistance for water resource infrastructure projects. And for FY21, they can provide funding for safety projects to maintain, upgrade, and repair dams. Eligible borrowers are local, state, tribal entities, partnerships, joint ventures, corporations, trusts, and state infrastructure financing authorities. So this might be a better option for those private dam owners that might need funding and don't qualify for the HHPD grant. They're available to projects or a group of projects with eligible costs in excess of $20 million, and they can help fund up to 49% of project costs. You can visit this website for more information. Unlike HHPD, TCEQ Dam Safety is not really involved in this application process, and it is pretty new information coming out, so we don't have a lot of expertise on the program, but if you have questions, you can email us and we'll try to help you. Finally, I'm going to touch on an owner resource that's available to you. You can go to damowner.org. This is a website put together by the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. And on this page, you'll find links to some Dam Owner Academy videos that include information like Dams 101, dam inspections, spillways and outlets, and operation and maintenance plans. Those videos are about 10 minutes each, and you can also find them on YouTube. So you could subscribe to the ASDSO YouTube page, and you will always get notified when new videos are available. This page also has fact sheets and information for dam safety topics, including seepage, erosion, ground cover, rodents, spillways, everything you might need to know that Warren's going to touch on in a minute for the operation and maintenance of dams. And then we'll open it up for questions. And if we don't get to your question during this period, you can always email me or call me.